Did you find the room?
¿Ves? Hola.
Sí, estoy probando.
Okay.
Sí.
Reception.
Sí, sí, sí. ¿Se oye ahora?
The result is that.
¿Ya?
The work done.
¿Con el tuyo o con este?
Con este. ¿Ves? Pues déjame.
No.
I think it's working.
Bueno, pues
So much.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry for the delay.
No worries.
So let's here.
voy a escribir a servicios informáticos. Porque estas cosas no funcionan. Yo qué sé. Falta de profesionalidad, eso es lo que pasa. El micro de ahí.
Okay, and now one last thing is to present. Okay, so let me just. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be working. Oh, okay, sure.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for everyone for coming. This talk is in a series of the talks we are planning to do. Paid by the Lisbon project, but in this case we took the chance that Michel Destrade is a professor from the University of Harvard, very well known. Editorial board of many journals, and he's editor on at least one journal, I don't know more. And so it's very well known in mechanics of tissues. And also it's doing right now. It's in the wave propagation, determining properties from wave propagation. So he's chair of the department of mathematics, and we are taking the chance that he's also coming from as a member of the committee for PhD defense. So we took the chance of to do the presentation here also. And so thank you very much for coming, Michel, and the stage is yours.
Thank you for the invitation. So I should keep this, yeah?
Yes,
I should
please.
keep the microphone?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for coming. I see there's mostly young people. I hope you can understand me. Is it okay? I'm from France. I'm from Bordeaux, but I've been living in Galway, in Ireland, for a long time now. So I presume many of you are students. I don't know if you've given presentations. The first advice people give you is that you have to know your audience. So I guess I should ask you if you are anybody who's an undergraduate. Yeah, okay. Anybody who's in a master's program? Wow, okay. PhD program? A few more. And then postdoctoral fellows? No. Faculty? Okay, very good. So you must be students, and you're studying mechanics. What are they studying? Aeronautical engineer. Okay. Okay. That's good. Do you do aeroelasticity, maybe? Yeah. Okay. That's something. Okay. Good. So if you ever go on to give presentations and or maybe go on to a career path towards academia, you know, you will have to write papers and well, do some research, write papers, and then present your results at conferences and into journals, and you know, try basically to promote your science and your work. And a good way to do that is to get good pictures. And I think, you know, you should be encouraged to try to get good photographs or amazing, I don't know, graphs or simulations, something like this. When you happen to do that, it's not often, but when you happen to have a good picture, you can promote it, for instance, to the journal. You can ask them maybe to consider putting it on the front page. Why don't you just ask? You ask the editor was accepted. So could that picture be on the front page or on the back page, on the cover page? You can also write to websites or to other journals to see if they accept the picture. So the first picture is a picture of the brain. Here, that's the brain of the pig. That's 3,500 times blown up. And we submitted that to Physics Today. I don't know if you know Physics Today. It's a magazine that, you know, covers the state of the art of physics. And they published it in their paper, in English. And the second one is about instabilities inside a tube. Right? If you compress a tube and it was growing as well, you can have nice instabilities, nice patterns, and sometimes the two, you know, it becomes a two-dimensional pattern, and you get these funny images here. So it's just looking down inside the tube. And here, that's a picture. I didn't manage to sell it to Physics Today, but I will show you how I managed to sort of promote it. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, this is working. So today I'll be talking about how to use waves to measure the properties of materials and also to measure stresses directly in materials, elastic waves. And you know, you've probably seen this in real life. You throw a pebble into a pond, and you see circular waves. You know, circular wavefront propagating away from the impact. What if you were to impact a solid like this, right? You can't see it with your own eyes, but in fact there are pictures, there are wavefronts propagating, just like this. And I will show you that we managed to do it visually, and we did it on a drum, for instance. That's a good way to make things more approachable. Okay, so I will introduce you briefly. Yeah, I'm going to try to keep everything as simple as possible. There will be very little mathematics and a lot of pictures. I will introduce you briefly to the topic of waves in solids. Then I'll show you how traditionally it's been used to find the material properties of solids. And now I'll show you a new way of measuring stresses in solids. And one way to do that, you know, the idea is just you send a wave in a solid, you measure how fast it goes in many directions maybe, and from this you can infer some conclusions, maybe anisotropy, maybe, you know, the faster the wave goes, it should be the stiffer the material, so on and so forth. There's a lot of theory behind this, and you can easily connect the quantities one to another. That's for linear elasticity. What if you want to go further and do nonlinear elasticity? You know, imagine that material is subject to not only a small strain, but a little bit of a strain, a little bit further. I forgot to say, please interrupt me anytime you don't follow something, or if I'm not clear, or if you have a question. No problem. So traditionally, what you do, if you want to know, say this is a piece of concrete or metal, for instance, and you want to know the material properties of this piece. You want to know how stiff it is, what are the elastic coefficients. So you send a wave, and you get access to one constant. And now, if you were to deform the material, so here you see it's between it's being compressed, then the wave speed is going to change, and that's what we have here. Changing the wave speed is the strain. And what you do, you can have an acoustic actuator here, receptor here, you just send a signal and measure how long it takes to reach the other end. And then you increase the strain, and you can see that there's changes in the speed. So there's two speeds here because there's two ways you can have, depending on the propagation, polarization, and so on and so forth. And then from the slopes here, you can deduce some more information about the material properties. Now, this is for a hard solid, right? Like I said, a rock or metal, and the strains are tiny, right? This is 10 to the power minus 6. So here, that's just 0.5% deformation, and yet you can easily find the difference. You can measure the difference. Now, what if the material was soft, or could be deformed more? For instance, 2%, 4%, and then you will need to go a bit further in the expression of the speed in terms of the strain. But it's not that difficult. I teach this course often in graduate classes. It takes maybe a couple of weeks before you get to the formula, and then the formula is very simple. I will show you the formula. So you can either learn how to derive the formula, or you can just use the formula straight away. But you will find that you have at the beginning it's the linear variation, and then it's the quadratic variation, and so on, and that involves the other material properties. Right. So I've been doing this since my PhD. Wow. Yeah, 25 years ago. Other than that, you probably weren't born. That's depressing. Anyway, so I've been doing that mathematically, and then in the past 10 years or so, I've been doing it experimentally. But mathematically, like I say, it's quite simple. So you look at the propagation of the wave in the material that's deformed, right? So lambda is called the stretch ratio, E is called the extension, right? If E is 0.2, for instance, it means, or minus 0.2 means you are compressed 20%. And then you have to make some assumption about the material. You have to say, okay, maybe it's a soft biological material, so I'm going to look in the books, and they tell me that the full strain energy is quite popular. So I say, okay, I'm going to use this material. So then I won't go into the details. Here you see the mu, that's called the shear modulus. You might come across that. And then B here, that's the stiffening parameter. That's, the more you stretch, which seems to be like an exponential growth in the strain energy. So really, that's what I mean by stiffening. So there's just two parameters here, mu and B, that I need to determine for my wave speed measurements. And then if you do all that theory I was telling you about, you will find this relationship between the speed, that's the mass density, and then here you see here, there's mu, what I want to find, and E, what I want to find, and lambda that I can measure when I'm deforming the material. And so that's the basis for the acoustoelastic determination of material parameters. If you do, so here I'm just doing incompressible material, so there's just one Lamy coefficient, right, mu 0, the shear modulus. There's also lambda, you might use that quantity, but goes to infinity for incompressible material. So if you have a linear incompressible material, that's the strain energy. If you go a bit further, you get, if you expand over in terms of E, that's the strain tensor, the Green-Lyman strain tensor. You have more constants that appear. These are called the Landau constants or the Mølleren constants. I don't know if you come across this. Don't worry too much. Say I want to find those three constants using that theory I was mentioning earlier. You will find this relationship now between the speed and the constants. You can see there's linear variation in the extension, quadratic variation in the extension. And then in practice, these are measurements we did for the brain, for instance. Right? So you have a piece of brain, you measure the speed in the piece of brain. When there's no deformation, we find about for rho v squared, oh sorry, that's not in meters per second, that's in pascals, we find about 2000 pascals. So that tells you that mu, when E is 0, mu is about 2000 pascals. And then we deform the material 10%, 20%, 30%, we just compress it, we see that the speed increases, and now we just need to do, curve fitting exercise, very simple. We need to curve fit this to a quadratic, and the linear part will give us A, and then the third quantity will give us access to D. Or you could do curve fitting to this, and also. That's it. The principle is very simple, and anybody can do that using Excel probably, right? And then you have access. That's it. That's the idea. How easy is that? I show you how we do it in practice. In practice, we use what's called shear wave elastography. So that's a machine you will find probably in Madrid. There's a couple of hospitals who have that machine. So it's like an ultrasound imaging probe that gives you an image of what's underneath here in the tissues, for instance. And not only it does that, but it also generates a shear wave. And the ultrasound image is very fast, about 10,000 frames per second. So when the shear wave is generated, it just goes through the field. It's like a real-time video, and so you can capture it and measure its speed. It's very clever. And so that's the principle. And what happens is that you focus on beam inside the tissue at the point where it's going, if you want to create a sort of small explosion, and then the focus of the beam goes deeper and deeper into the tissue, and then those successive explosions, they just interact constructively to create a waveform here. That's the shear wave. So it's much slower, the shear wave is quite slow compared to the speed of the beam focus. Okay, don't worry about this. Just to tell you that this is pretty, there should be an animation here. Okay, don't worry. We did finite element simulation of what's happening. And so the beam goes down and the wave just travels like this. And then the ultrasound video just captures the wave and tells you how fast it is. And that's how we can do those measurements. That's the ultrasound image, black and white image. That's the brain of a PhD student. That's the pig, right? The pig, yeah. And well, just show you that the brain is intact. We didn't have to slice it, put it in the testing machine. You see, I gives you the idea that acoustic evaluation is non-destructive, right? We could have kept the pig alive and do the measurements in its brain. So that's the B mode, the ultrasound mode, and then there's different images because we are compressing. And as we compress, this here tells you the speed of the wave. You see 4 meters per second with the red part. As we compress, the speed decreases. So you just pick an area, and in that area, you could follow. For instance, you can follow how a rectangle deforms, and that gives you the lambda, the stretch or the extension. And then in that area, you can follow how the speed changes. And that's how I got access to that curve I had earlier. Right, so the principle is very easy. We have those curves. We do the curve fitting to this, to that, and then we get access to the parameters. So just to show you what it looks like. Oh, sorry, went too fast. So we did for 6 pigs, the left and the right hemisphere tried to find differences. There wasn't much differences. So you see it's about 2 kilopascals, 2000 pascals for the shear modulus, and then you have nonlinear parameters, B for the full model, for A and B for the elasticity model. Right, so 2000 kilopascals, that's very, very soft. I don't know if you have any idea, but usually for rubber, it's in the megapascals. For steel and quartz, it's in the gigapascals. So brain is very, very soft. It's soft as, I don't know, yogurt, basically, or jelly. Okay, once you have the parameters, you can feed them into computer simulations. You guys do computer simulations, use Abacus, console, that kind of thing. You know that when you define the geometry, so this is a model we use in UCD in Dublin, but you also have to feed in the parameters, the elastic parameters, and the accuracy of the simulation is going to be as good as the accuracy of or as bad as the accuracy of the parameters. So here, that's a PhD supervisor. PhD student is not happy, and then, it's very hard to know what happens in the brain because you can't put cameras in the brain or you can't put sensors in the brain. An event, maybe a concussion like here or a car accident, whatever, or maybe surgery. But if you do a computer simulation, then you can have an idea of how high the stresses and the strains are inside. Okay, so that was the first part of my talk. Any questions? I forgot to say there will be an interlude at some stage. We'll do a game, we'll do a quiz. How about that? Any questions? You all are happy? This is called traditional non-destructive evaluation of material properties. And that's the result that you can do if you do computer simulation. Okay, now that's all good. But what if you don't know the material properties of the material, or you don't have access to them, right? That's tricky. Like, so, for instance, look at this beam here in the room, or think of, since you're into aerospace, think of a truss or a piece of metal in an airplane. The airplane is maybe 20 years old. You knew what it was made of at the time, 20 years ago, but ever since, it's been going through thousands of cycles, suffering from fatigue and so on and so forth. Probably the properties have changed now. Or look at this railway here. If it expands, go through those expansions and contraction cycles, if it expands too much, it can buckle. It might be very important to know what is the state of stress in the rail before it buckles, right? Because maybe you have some guidelines that tells you that if it reaches this stress, it might buckle and so on and so forth. So it's important to follow the stress, but sometimes you don't have access to the material properties, right? The only way I could have access to the material properties of this rail is just to cut out the piece and bring it into the lab and do those wave experiments. But maybe compress or extend. But here I can't do that. It's in situ. This beam, I don't know. How would you know what is the stress in this beam? Do you learn any techniques? I don't know. So we thought we look in the literature and see what they say. And in the literature on acoustics, you find this formula here. What does it tell you? That the stress, so imagine that you have a beam, like the railway, and it's under uniaxial stress, is related to the mass density. Mass density, that's quite okay, easy to measure. And then you have two wave speeds and K. The wave speeds are the speed. So what you do is you put acoustic emitter and receptor here, and you measure the speed of two waves. One wave, so 2-1, that's the wave that goes along the 2 direction and is polarized along the 1 direction. And 2-3 goes along the 2 direction and is polarized along the 3 direction. These are easy to measure. Right? You just need, it costs nothing. Those ultrasonic actuators, you buy them for pennies, a couple of dollars or euros. And then you just rotate them and you get this. So that's easy. And then you have this K here. That's the problem. What is K? If you look up, it's called the birefringence coefficient. You will see that it's defined in terms of AMU. Remember I was introducing AMU earlier, or M if you do what's called the Brownian constant. So it depends on second and third order elasticity constants. And you say, okay, so I just need to know K for this rail, and I'll be okay, then I can find the stress. But if you look in the literature, the problem is that there is no agreed value for K of steel. Okay.
Sorry.
If you look in the literature for a railway, you will find all sorts of values. You see that there's different rails, there's different ways the steel is made, but you find that the values vary a lot, right? From minus 1.8 to minus 1, and some of those rail samples were from the same railway, and yet they got different. So it's very unsatisfying, right? You won't be able to measure accurately the stress. So bioreference formula is used, but it's not great. So we looked into the literature again, and then we came across this formula. That's great. Look, all you need is mass density and the wave speed of two waves. That's from Maurice Biot 80 years ago. And he said, all I need to do is measure the speed of the wave propagating along 2 and polarized along 1. That's the one I was showing you before, right? So I just put the method here and this. And then the 1, 2, that's the wave propagating along 1 and polarized along 2. That's the problem, right? That's why nobody uses this formula, because how am I going to measure this here? I don't know. I can't put a receptor inside the rail. I'm in trouble. All right? So maybe I just cut it open, put the receptor. When you cut it open, then you're just damaging or destructive. So, big disappointment, right? Remember, the only way you can do that is by cutting a piece and bringing it to the lab. So, here's something I want to show you. Some maths now. You ready for the maths? Okay, so that's what the speed going at right angle with respect to the axis. What if the wave was going at an angle? Why not? Yeah? Let's see, that would be, that's not too hard. You put the wedge of steel, and then you just put the emitter of the wedge, and you get, it's not too difficult to do that. In fact, we're doing that now in Sheffield, in the University of Sheffield. So then you start looking in the literature. First, we're going to do incompressible solids. So steel is not incompressible, but imagine you were incompressible solid. You find this very neat formula. That's, I think, is very often. We wrote it in this form. What do we have? Rho v squared is alpha. So here theta is the angle. And then you have alpha, beta, gamma. Beta is complicated. We won't need it, so I won't tell you what it looks like. So alpha and gamma, they are pretty simple expressions relating, involving the stress and the stretches. So lambda 1 is the stretch in one direction, and lambda 2 is the stretch. Now look at these two coefficients. If I do one minus the other, I will see that the fractions disappear. So if I was able to measure alpha minus gamma, I will get the stress straight away. Okay? Now, some maths now. Let's do some maths. What if I was to use this angle now, 90 degrees minus theta? Then you might remember from your high school that the cos will turn into sine and the sine to cos, and so on, right? That's the formula for this complementary angle. And now look, you have to do this in your head. So if you do one minus the other, the beta terms are going to cancel out. The alpha term is going to be factorized by cos 4 minus sine 4. The gamma term will be minus cos 4 plus sine 4. Right? So I can factorize. And then cos 4 minus sine 4, you might remember trigonometry, but it's just cos of 2 theta. And so if I do one minus the other, I get alpha minus gamma times cos 2 theta, and now I find myself in sigma, so I get sigma. How about that? That's as hard as it gets. Nobody had noticed that before. Imagine. Well, as far as I can tell, nobody, maybe somebody did. We haven't found it yet. So that's the principle. So it's quite easy, right, in principle, to get access to the stress without having to cut inside the material. You just measure the speed in this direction, then you take the complementary and you do it in the other direction. You divide, you subtract, you divide, and you get access to stress. Hey, et presto. Et voila, as you say. So we're working on checking this formula in the lab now. We've done, oh, sorry, yeah, I forgot to say that was for a compressible solid. So now if you go to compressible solids, then it gets a bit more complicated, but you find that the formula still holds, which is great. It's very robust, provided you stop at third order elasticity, right? There's going to be corrections due to compressibility, but that higher order. So the formula still holds. And so the first thing we did for this paper here is that we did finite element simulations to measure the speed of the wave in a compressed beam of steel. And then from the formula, we deduce the stress. From the simulation, we know the applied stress, and you can see that, you know, the difference is less than 1%. It's incredibly precise, at least in the simulations. So now we're trying to do it in the lab, you know, in Sheffield, they're funded by, for this project, they're funded by the US Railway Association and then by British Rail. So there's a huge interest in the rail industry about knowing what the stress is. Okay, so you ready for the quiz now? Any questions? Yes.
Is there any refraction in the wave between the edge and the structure?
Yeah, that would, you mean, oh, here? Yes. Here, yeah, there could be refraction. So in the simulation, it's easy, right? Because we can have exactly the same material. We have a perfect material. In the experiments, you need to have a wedge, like I said, and there could be like an imperfect interface, and then there could be some refraction. So we're hoping that those effects are, you know, small compared to the formula. But yeah, you could in fact take that into account. Yes?
Would you have any problem if you are close to the natural frequency?
Huh. I didn't think of that. Yeah, probably you could have resonance and things like that. Sure. But yeah, these are ultrasonic waves, so I think they might be in a different range. I don't know. I never thought of that. Good question. Okay, you ready for the quiz? So it's a quiz about movie titles. So it might be difficult if you are Spanish or if you grew up in Spain, because I believe in Spain, American movies are, the title is translated, right? So you need to know the original title if you want to. Yes. Okay. So like, which movie is this?
That's funny. Can I answer?
Yeah.
It's Wally.
Wally, very good. Round of applause. Okay, which movie is this? Which is that? It's not the wave equation, right? Wave equation would be the second derivative. Hit! Very good. You know that movie? Hit?
Yeah.
Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. Okay. What about this movie? Which movie is this? Matrix? Matrix Revolutions! Very good. Okay, you're on the roll. Okay, what about this movie? What does that look? Yeah. Fast and Furious. Very good. Why you keep the Fast and Furious series? Okay. Big question. Is not called Fast and Furious in Spanish? Okay, then. No excuse. Okay. So, you see the interest of what I was presenting, that I have access to the stress without knowing what the material properties are. I didn't have to invoke W, I didn't have to talk about mu, AMD, and so on. Completely independent of the strain energy. The only assumption is that the material is initially isotropic, that could be compressible or incompressible, and the angle method will work. Okay, so then we went on to do that for plates. So I don't know if you do acoustics, waves. It's just plate waves are very similar to body waves, but they just they are bouncing off by the boundaries. Now the plate, the dimension, if the thickness of the plate is comparable to the wavelength, then you have all sorts of effects, and the wave is more complicated, right? And also you will find that there are different modes, symmetric and symmetric, and then that the wave is dispersive. When you generate a wave like this, like by hitting the plate, you will have an infinity of wave modes propagating, symmetric and symmetric, and then wave that propagate fast and wave that propagate slow, depending on their frequency. That's what's called dispersive. So the maths are a bit more complicated. You end up with a transcendental dispersion equation that you have to solve numerically. But still, you will find that it depends on the frequency, and it depends on those two quantities I was telling you earlier, and the beta as well, and so on. But it just so happens, if you study the dispersion graphs, that you will notice a few things, right? There are limits, there are ways of getting information about alpha and gamma from the dispersion graph. And one thing you can find is that you can have access to alpha and gamma independently from the dispersion curve. And that's brilliant, right? Because remember, alpha minus gamma is sigma. Another thing you can notice is that if I divide alpha by gamma, these fractions and this fraction cancel out, and I'll end up with lambda 1 over lambda 2 squared. And that's lambda, if I call lambda, or I should say lambda 1 cubed, if it's just uniaxial spread. So, from the dispersion curve, I can get access to the stress and the stretch independently. That's why I call it model-free formula, independently of the material properties. Amazing. And we say, okay, let's do it. We did it for a rubber membrane. We hit it here with a piezoelectric probe, and then I make it sound like it's easy, but it's very advanced, right? I use colleagues in the Harvard School of Medicine, and they use what's called OCT, optical coherence tomography. It's like a laser imaging technique that allows you to pick up, tiny displacement on the surface of materials. But you get access to the antisymmetric, symmetric one, and so on. It's a lot of image processing, two-dimensional Fourier transforms, and so on and so forth. I won't go into the details, but the idea is that you have the membrane, we hit it like this, and this is a photograph, right? This is not a simulation. this photograph, if you look closely, if you zoom in, you will find some imperfection. So it's a photograph. The radius of the wavefront is in the millimeter. The elevation is in the nanometer. So what we did here was to blow up the vertical. That's why it's arbitrary. Blew up from the data. We blew up the vertical axis so that you can see exactly those wavefronts we saw earlier about the waterways. But it's a photograph. Amazing. I find it amazing. And then you can stretch the material by a known amount of stress, and you can see that the circles turn into ellipses. You can then you analyze this field here. So that's all the movie from above. Yeah, you can see it effectively. Then you analyze the film and figure out the speed of each wave for each frequency. And then if you increase the stress, the dispersion curve are going to shift like this, and so on and so forth. And then from the dispersion curve, I can find alpha and gamma, and so I can find sigma. Sigma 2 is 0. That's as it should be. I can find sigma. The one I apply, I know how much I apply because I'm just pulling on the membrane. And then the one I measure from the speed, you can see, is pretty good, right? It's about 5% error. And you can find the stretches as well, lambda 1 and lambda 2, using alpha over gamma, and also pretty good. And then, if you want, you could actually plot the stress. You have the stretch, and you get those red dots. And then you can independently, if you're not convinced, you can independently do a test, delta test, and you find that it's pretty close. So if you wanted to, you could get the stress strain relationship from the speed measurement. But I didn't need that because I don't need to know what the stress strain relationship is. I don't need to know what the material is about. I can just do those stress and stress measurements directly. So if you're like an early stage researcher, you say, this is fantastic, this is brilliant. I will write a super paper about that. But then if you're more seasoned, or if your advisor is more seasoned, he will, or she will say, why don't we bring it to the limit, push it to the limit, make it more, more sexy if you want. You could sell it to a bigger audience. So I said, why don't we do it on cling film? Right? So cling film is super thin, right? It's about 10 micrometers. Wrap film. You know what I mean? And still we managed to do the CT and measure this. We weren't able to, it's just too thin. You can't have access to the strain, but you can have access to the stress. And it's pretty good. And it's pretty amazing because cling film is not incompressible, and still the formula seems to be very robust. And then I said, let's bring it to the next level, right? In fact, it was my wife who said that. So you shouldn't underestimate, the power of trying to explain what you're doing to others. Well, I'm sure you have friends who are not in this field, and they ask you, what are you doing with your life, basically? What are you studying at your age, and so on? And you have to, explain that, it's really important, and so on. And then they go, oh, I see what you mean, and so on. So I was telling this to my wife that we were measuring the speed of wave in stretch materials, and she said, oh, that makes me think of this drum, the boron. I'll show you what the boron is. It's this traditional drum in Ireland. I don't know if you've ever been to Ireland. If you go in the pub, there's a good chance you might see a drum.
Shall I click?
The boron. Maybe I have to. No? Oh, never mind.
There is a YouTube link, Michel, sorry.
Anyway, she told me, did you know that boron players they sometimes wet the drum head to make it slacker, or they rub it to dry it to make it taut. Oh, that's really interesting. It turns out everybody in Ireland knows that. So I thought, why don't we do that, right? So I bought online. I bought a drum, Irish drum, and I sent it to Boston, and it was delivered there. During COVID, it's crazy, right? And they did the experiments on the, then they wet it, they dried it, and they saw that there was a shift, right? There's a big shift in the stress and in the strain, right? It's more than 50% difference. That was pretty cool. And then say, let's put it in the article. And then once you have an article with sexy result like this, you write the press release, you send it to the press office. I'm sure there's a press office in the university. No?
Yeah.
Yes. And you say, hey, I got something about the boron. That's what it's called, boron. You go, what? That's amazing. And then they send it to the newspaper. And then, sure enough, it was taken up by, look at it, by the Irish Times, which is like the main newspaper now. That's my poor wife. She's like, oh, why did I tell you that? Really, it was on the front page. On the front page of the article, the Irish love things about Irish. Right? So I'm sure in Spain you would have found the equivalent. Think of something local like this, traditional, something that would get people exercise. Right? So I felt like I've arrived and I can retire now. Yes. Fine. Okay, so really for all those things, and then the idea, of course, that people say, why are you doing this? Because in the end, we want to do it for membranes in the body, right? Like the diaphragm, the eardrum, the arterial veins walls, or the bladder wall. Right, so this like millimeters all the way to tens of micrometers. So that's the dream. Of course, it's far in the future, but maybe I will get there. Okay, so that's it for waves in place. Now let's go back to the waves in the real. Remember, I was telling you the problem here is that you cannot measure this wave speed with acoustic, with ultrasonic device. Now, if you remember what I was showing you about shear wave, so yeah, classical ultrasonic evaluation, this one is easy to produce. Remember what I was telling you about the shear wave elastography is the opposite. The shear wave elastography probe can generate a wave that goes in this direction, right? It's easy to measure the one. So would it be nice if we could do, well, we can't use shear wave elastography in beams, right? In steel, in hard solids. So that was no go. What about generating this wave in soft solids? Yeah, let's try this. So what you have to do now is program the probe. Instead of having a beam going this way, you'll have a beam going that way, and that will generate a wave in this direction. And you have to do it simultaneously. So it's not easy, right? It's not me who did it, it's my colleagues in Beijing, in the Tsinghua University. But they managed to do this, right? So they program the probe to hit at 6 points like this on a horizontal line. So it creates those explosions, and then the wavefront is generated in this direction. At the same time that is one generated in that direction. So it's quite a technological achievement. I would be able to do that. That shows you the importance of collaborating with people who have different expertise. But if you look, so this is the finite element simulation. So this is traveling like this, and there's a wavefront going down. And these are the measurements. And then you need to do a very advanced now image analysis. But they were able to find those two waves. The first one is easy, and the second one they're able to measure it too. And then, of course, the problem is that most soft tissues, brain is isotropic, but most soft tissues are anisotropic, right? There are fibers, collagen fibers embedded inside elastic matrix, and it means that that the properties are different in different directions. And yet, we were able to show that this formula still holds, provided the stress and the fibers are aligned, the tensors are aligned. So again, we have this formula. We don't need to know what the material is made of. We just need to know that it could be anisotropy, provided the stress and the texture, the anisotropy tensor are coaxial. And the formula works. And so that gave us access to the stress through this formula, right? So here is a piece of big meat muscle. You can see in the ultrasound, you can see the fibers quite clearly. This is the analysis we did. And then we are measuring the wave speed against the applied stress and using the formula to deduce the stress against the one we know we've applied. So the error is about 15% now. That's still pretty amazing. It's independent of what the material is made of. We just know that the fibers are like this, and you can see them, and we apply the stress in this direction. That's all you need to do using this machine. Okay, so that's my conclusion. The stress and the strain can be accessed directly from Western or even on the material. How amazing is that? And these are the 3 papers we've written in turn: the one in the rail, the one in the plates, and the one in the soft materials program. And these are my collaborators. Arthur was my PhD student, Hu Yang and Andy were in Harvard, and then Yang Ping is in Tsinghua. Okay, so that's it for me. I have an announcement. Do you have 5 minutes? 1 minute? Yeah, I don't want to. Just want to do some publicity. So, if you ever want, look me up on YouTube. I have some funny videos there, and also I have a whole course on nonlinear elasticity. If you're interested in this, 20 lecture notes. Myself and Giuseppe Zolo, we recorded them during the pandemic because we were teaching online, and then we just put them on YouTube. So it's a complete course in 20 lectures. But each of them are about 50, 60 minutes. And then, please consider visiting us in Galway. It's a beautiful place. It rains a lot. It's not shown here on the picture, but it's very nice. So if you're a student or academic, just contact us, and we'll see what we can do to accommodate you. And another thing I wanted to advertise is that I am the reviews editor for Proceedings of the Society. It means, I deal with review papers. So you might have started on the literature search, about the topic of your thesis, for instance. You have, a big collection of papers, of references, and a good understanding of the field. Why not consider writing a review paper? And then contact me, and I will give you some feedback. I will say, "Oh, that's terrible." I'll say, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty promising." Maybe, I'm also talking about practice. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
You see, he's a great communicator.
That's right. That's right.
So I don't know if you want to.
Thank you. I know it's more quiz. Difficult. They're more difficult. Where is the
Like a movie called Gravity? Like Gravity or
gravity? No, because look what happens. From there and crashing.
Life?
So it's difficult. But yeah, I have a movie for Gravity. I have another one for Gravity. It just says G equals 9.81. Yeah, it is good.
I didn't know about the matrix revolution.
Yes, that was good.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have this?
Let me like move it like safely. Sorry, because at the beginning of the presentation it wasn't working, so I was the one like
Oh,
passing
is
the
that
slides.
it?
But then at the middle,
It started working.
yeah, it started working. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe the battery is gone.
I don't know. But
Hi.
I just got another question.
Yeah?
How do you apply this method with an organ that contains liquid? For example, the heart. Can you
Yeah.
measure the heart with liquid on it that you don't have access to? The
Sorry,
other?
sorry.
Yeah.
We're going to have coffee. Do you want coffee?
Okay, yeah, I come. Yeah.
Okay, I wait for you.
Okay. Yeah, if you concentrate on the solid part, yeah. Yeah, with the machine.